Welcome to Learn While You Sleep. Tonight, I'll help your mind drift into rest while gently feeding it knowledge about the human mind. Breathe deeply and let's begin. Close your eyes and let yourself drift into the quiet theater of your own mind. Imagine billions of tiny lights glowing softly like a city at night. They flicker and pulse in gentle rhythms without you ever needing to ask. Each spark is a whisper, a current flowing gracefully along invisible pathways. Together, they weave a delicate harmony, the music of your thoughts. You don't need to control it. You don't need to conduct it. The symphony plays on its own, while you simply rest here, listening, floating, and being carried by it. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and local time in the comments. I'm glad that most of you are listening from the United States and Canada, and I hope you enjoy this video. I also love hearing from listeners all around the world, like those of you in Germany and Austria who left kind words, or the ones tuning in from New Zealand and Australia. And don't worry, Britain, I won't forget to mention you. I'm so glad you're here. There's comfort in knowing that while you rest, others across the globe are breathing slowly too, scattered like glowing neurons in the night sky. Each one distant, yet still part of a shared, unspoken connection. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Adjust your blanket. Let's ease into tonight's journey together, one breath at a time. Let each inhale soften you, and each exhale release a little more weight. The rhythm is gentle, steady, always there to carry you. You drift deeper, noticing how even lying down feels less like a choice and more like a script your body knows by heart. The pillow shift, the quiet sigh, the little fidget of your toes. Neuroscientists say those movements don't start when you decide them, but milliseconds before, in hidden electrical storms across your cortex. It's like watching a film you swear you haven't seen, yet somehow knowing every line before it's spoken. The familiarity is uncanny, but strangely comforting, as though your body has always rehearsed this scene. Mainstream fact: the brain holds about 86 billion neurons, each one a tiny switch firing or resting, weaving the patterns we call thought. You didn't design it, it booted up for you. Quirky tidbit: a single neuron's electrical pop is so faint that, amplified, it would sound like soft popcorn crackling in your speakers. Imagine your deepest feelings reduced to gentle snack sounds, each pop another fragment of your private inner universe. Your brain loves rhythm, circadian cycles tugging you toward sleep, hormonal tides shaping moods, even that strange synchrony when you yawn because someone else did. These patterns run regardless of intention. Brain chemistry is clockwork, intricate, automatic. Just as you can't order your heart to skip beats, you can't will yourself into serotonin overflow. The recipes are written, and you're not the chef, you're the taster. Think of dopamine, that mischievous messenger lighting up when you scroll endlessly, snack absent-mindedly, or chase likes online. You like to think you're steering, but dopamine quietly nudges the wheel. Half your choices could be reduced to a lab rat pressing a lever for sugar water. Don't worry, you've got better hair than a rat, usually, and at least your cage has Wi-Fi. Meanwhile, the backstage crew works on. The hippocampus tidies memories like a night librarian. The thalamus filters sensory clutter, so your room doesn't overwhelm you with every tick and hum. You're tucked in, drifting, while the brainstaff handles the night shift. Scientists call it unconscious processing, but it's more like stagehands making sure the spotlight feels effortless. Here's another twist. When you think you're deciding, your brain often settles the vote in fractions of a second. Tea or water? Your anterior cingulate has already weighed hydration, caffeine cravings, and last week's habits before you sense the choice. You're granted the polite illusion of authority, like a ceremonial monarch, rubber stamping laws already passed. And so you smile at the absurdity. Billions of neurons nudging and tugging, their symphony echoing in your skull. You're listening to music you never composed, yet humming along as though it's yours. Remember that whisper about stardust. The very atoms firing now once burned inside stars. They're still dancing to choreography older than humanity. You thought you were improvising. Turns out you're following sheet music written in chemistry. Even in dreams, the show continues. Brainwaves roll like tides, alpha, beta, delta, never asking permission. You ride them the way a leaf rides a current. Scientists debate whether dreams clean memories, rehearse emotions, or simply spark at random. But what matters tonight is how little you must control. You're tucked in, neurons still playing their lullaby, writing the script, painting the scenery, and carrying you deeper into rest. So you rest, wrapped in quiet irony. Your thoughts feel personal, yet they're written in code you didn't author. You exhale. The clockwork ticks softly on. Neurons keep time, conducting their sleepy symphony, while you drift, both audience and unwitting performer. You sink a little deeper into the thought that even your body carried a script before you were born. Picture your DNA like a spiral staircase stretching back through time, each step carved by generations you never met. It isn't just eye color and hair texture wrapped in those strands. It's tendencies, temperaments, even little quirks that nudge you. You can almost hear the double helix whispering, "Here's the menu of your potential," before you ever placed an order. Genes set a stage. The rhythm of your metabolism, your sleep cycles. Whether you're more prone to thrill-seeking or curling up safely at home. Mainstream fact: scientists have identified gene clusters that influence how your brain processes dopamine, shaping whether you feel more satisfied by novelty or by routine. That itch to explore new hobbies, or the comfort in repeating your favorite meal every week. Both can be traced back to hidden genetic levers. But here's the quirky tidbit. Researchers found that some people have a wanderlust gene, nicknamed DRD4-7R, linked to curiosity and exploration. It shows up more often in populations with histories of migration. Imagine your ancestors trudging across continents while others stayed cozy in their villages. And here you are restlessly scrolling through travel deals at 2 a.m., never knowing the urge might be a genetic echo. You chuckle because the idea that a single chemical tweak in your DNA could make you more likely to book flights feels like being pranked by your great-great-great-great-grandmother. Scientists still argue whether genes directly control behavior or simply set parameters, like bumpers in a bowling lane. Maybe you can wiggle within that lane. Maybe you can bank some trick shots, but the ball is still rolling in a channel laid long before you. You think of that comforting metaphor. You're not the author of your story, but perhaps you are the narrator, reading aloud from a script already printed. Even your appetite whispers of destiny. Some people are genetically wired to taste bitterness more strongly. Coffee might strike them as acrid poison while others sip happily. Ever noticed how cilantro tastes like soap to a friend? That too can be genetic. You never signed up for the cilantro contract, but your DNA scribbled the terms for you like a mischievous chef, hiding in your genome. And then there are the stranger inheritances. A study once suggested that trauma can echo down generations, altering stress responses and descendants. Your anxieties tonight might hum with the faint vibrations of battles, famines, or migrations your ancestors endured. You drift into the eerie thought that you're carrying not just their faces in the mirror, but their unfinished stories. The lullaby in your blood is old, and it plays on without asking. You wiggle your fingers absent-mindedly, marveling at how much of your reflexes are pre-scripted. Genes built the architecture of your brain, sculpted your synapses, determined whether your serotonin transporters were stingy or generous. You don't decide how quickly neurotransmitters get recycled, yet that recycling rate affects whether you laugh easily or brood longer. You smirk, thinking of it as the customer service department of your emotions. And sometimes, customer service is really slow. Take sleep, for instance. You think you're in control of when you go to bed, but genetic chronotypes tilt the table. Some of us are night owls, others larks, and the alarm clock you set is really an argument with your DNA. You can force yourself up early, but your genes are quietly grumbling, "This isn't our shift." Still, you find a kind of wonder here. Your body isn't a cage. It's a library filled with ancient instructions. You walk through the aisles every day, pulling books you didn't write, yet reading them as though they're your own. And maybe the comfort comes from realizing you are part of a lineage far older than you can remember. Those spirals of DNA connect you to fish that crawled out of the sea, to ancestors who lit fires under starry skies. The choices you think you're making now shimmer faintly with echoes from eons past. Remember that whisper of popcorn neurons from before? Tonight, they're firing along highways paved by DNA, roads designed long before you learned to crawl. You giggle softly at the absurdity. Maybe your love for chocolate, your taste in music, or your dislike of math was already penciled into the blueprint. You're not a blank page. You're a palimpsest, a manuscript written over countless times, your words blending with faint ancestral ink. So as you drift, you rest in the idea that your DNA has been humming this lullaby for millennia. You didn't choose the key, the rhythm, or the chorus, but you get to hum along. And maybe that's enough, here in the quiet, where destiny feels less like a burden and more like a gentle cradle rocking you into sleep. You float now into the invisible net you never quite see, but always feel. The tug of culture, language, customs, rules you didn't draft but that nudge every step you take. It's like you were born into a play already in progress, costumes chosen, scripts written, and everyone around you nods as though the lines are natural. You grow up speaking not just words but assumptions. What's polite, what's tasty, what's sacred, what's laughable. You call these things choices, yet they're more like inherited rhythms passed down in whispers and lullabies. Think about language itself. You believe you're expressing your own thoughts, but language frames the very thoughts you can form. Mainstream fact: in some languages, time flows left to right, in others east to west, in others as uphill or downhill. Your sense of time isn't just brain chemistry, it's sculpted by grammar. You never sat down and agreed, "Yes, I'll picture time as a flat line." But your words made that agreement for you. Here's the quirky tidbit. There's a tribe in the Amazon, the Piraha, whose language has no exact numbers. They don't say 7, they say few or many. Experiments show that when asked to count, they do it differently every time. It's not that they can't think, it's that their cultural framework shapes what counting even means. And you laugh, realizing that even your late-night budgeting spreadsheet is just one cultural trick, not some universal instinct. Scientists still argue whether culture shapes the brain as deeply as genes do, but they agree on this. Culture is a silent sculptor, chiseling what feels normal. You think you chose your favorite breakfast, but in Japan, it might be fish and rice. In France, a croissant. In America, pancakes drowning in syrup. The options available to you were curated before you ever said, "I'll have that." You can almost smile at how invisible these strings are. When you wear certain clothes, it isn't just fashion, it's conformity with subtle expectations. Try strolling barefoot into an office meeting and you'll feel those strings tug. Not because anyone threatened you, but because culture whispered, "Shoes, please." You obeyed before you even thought about it. Even your gestures are borrowed. Thumbs up, friendly in one place, insulting in another. You didn't invent that meaning. It was handed to you like an heirloom you never asked for. You drift into the funny realization that your body is basically a cultural puppet show. Arms and eyebrows dancing in patterns taught silently from infancy. Remember childhood lullabies? Not just songs, but carriers of values. Be quiet, be brave, and be kind. Don't stray. Those weren't your decisions, yet they became the architecture of your inner voice. You carry around a chorus of parents, teachers, neighbors, advertisements, all humming the background track of your personality. Culture even scripts your sense of beauty. Studies reveal that across cultures, people find symmetry attractive. But what counts as beautiful changes dramatically. Ancient Mayans admired elongated skulls. Some societies prized pale skin, others tan. You didn't personally decide which version was desirable. Your culture handed you a palette and told you, "This is lovely." And you nodded, as though you'd painted it yourself. Think about holidays. You light candles, eat special meals, gather in ways that feel deeply personal. But the choreography was rehearsed for centuries before you. You can almost hear ancestors chuckling, "Yes, we've been doing this forever. Welcome to the club." Your joy feels self-authored, but it's really participation in an ancient group project. You grin when you realize how much advertising piggybacks on culture. Ads don't invent desire. They tap into shared symbols, the red of passion, the green of freshness, the gold of success. You think you're picking a soda because you like the fizz, but maybe you're just responding to a cultural color code someone planted decades ago. It's like being tricked by a magician who only needed to wave a can in the right shade of red. Still, there's comfort in this. Culture is the quilt that keeps you warm at night. You didn't sew it, but it wraps you anyway, stitched by ancestors, neighbors, and friends. Even the lull of this narration, the tone, the idea of bedtime stories for adults, is itself cultural. You learn that stories belong with sleep, with soft voices, with trust. Without culture, you wouldn't even know when to close your eyes. So you drift, feeling the strings not as chains but as threads in a tapestry. You are woven into something larger, painted with invisible ink that guides your hands, your laughter, your sighs. You didn't choose this net, but it catches you gently as you float toward rest. And maybe, just maybe, that makes the surrender sweeter. You ease now into the memories that cling like soft dust on old furniture, the weight of childhood. Before you learned to call it choice, you were soaking up patterns like a sponge left out in the rain. Picture yourself toddling, eyes wide, repeating the accents, the gestures, the moods of whoever happened to loom nearby. You didn't vote on which nursery rhymes would echo in your head. They arrived uninvited, carried in lullabies and cartoons, and they built the scaffolding for every decision you would later believe was yours. Mainstream fact: Developmental psychologists say the human brain is most plastic, the most open to rewiring in the first few years of life. That's when your neural circuits are shaped by experiences, by how your caregivers respond, by whether your world feels safe or uncertain. Those formative years tilt the compass you'll carry, quietly influencing how you react to stress, love, or solitude decades later. You didn't ask for the compass. It was pressed into your hand before you even knew directions existed. Here's the quirky tidbit. Researchers once found that baby rats who were gently licked by their mothers grew up calmer and more resilient to stress. Those who weren't licked as much, more anxious, more reactive. It's not just a rat story. Similar patterns appear in humans too. Touch, affection, rhythm. They wire resilience. You giggle softly, imagining some cosmic researcher jotting "licked equals chill" in a lab notebook. But the truth is, nurture writes deep scripts in every species. Scientists still argue whether childhood experiences are permanent stamps or whether later life can rewrite the code. Therapy, love, trauma, all can reshape, but the early lines of the script often keep peeking through, no matter how many edits you attempt. It's like trying to erase pencil marks from old paper. The shadow remains. You think of bedtime rituals. Maybe you had a story read to you, maybe a song hummed, maybe just the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. Whatever it was, it seeped into your nervous system, teaching you what safe feels like. Even now, as you listen, your body remembers. You sigh, not because you chose to, but because your chest learned long ago that sighs mark safety. Childhood shaped even your taste buds. Remember being told vegetables were healthy or that dessert was special. You didn't set those values. They came wrapped in parental voices, in the way treats were rationed, in the way sighs of approval followed clean plates. Decades later, you may crave comfort foods without realizing that comfort is less about flavor and more about echoes of childhood applause. Think of play. The toys you were handed weren't neutral. Dolls, blocks, cars, crayons all subtly carried expectations. Were you praised for building tall towers or for dressing dolls with care? Those praises were scripts. They told you what roles were open to you, what paths were honorable. And you followed, because what child resists the glow of approval? Even your fears were borrowed. Did your parents gasp when a spider appeared? Did they flinch at thunderstorms? You inhaled their reactions as easily as you inhaled bedtime air. Childhood is the great rehearsal, and you were cast in a role before you auditioned. You can almost smile remembering school. Teachers lining you up, bells chiming like little control signals, bathrooms with passes. It felt normal. You didn't question it. But years later, you realize your sense of time, your sense of productivity, your belief in schedules. All of it was drafted in those chalk-dusted rooms. That was cultural programming running deep into your marrow. And then, of course, the lullabies of family sayings. Money doesn't grow on trees. Finish what you start. Don't talk back. Each phrase a seed, sprouting roots you never noticed. You still water them unconsciously every time you make choices that echo those voices. You're carrying a whole garden planted before you could spell. Remember the image of neurons popping like popcorn? In childhood, those kernels were popping furiously, building connections at lightning speed. Every pop etched another path, another reflex. You carry them still, like trails worn into the forest floor of your brain. Sometimes you follow them automatically, even when the scenery has changed. And yet, there's comfort. Childhood wasn't just a cage of influences. It was also the origin of wonder. The thrill of cartoons on Saturday mornings, the magic of birthdays, the quiet satisfaction of bedtime stories. Those scripts still play soft as background music. Tonight, as you close your eyes, you're not just you. You're the child who once believed the world was full of secrets waiting to be discovered. That child still hums in your chest, still sways with the weight of memories, still carries you gently into sleep. You drift into the quieter hum beneath everything, the sense that the world itself is stitched together by laws you didn't design and cannot escape. Atoms, quarks, photons, the building blocks of your every move. They obey physics before they obey you. You raise your hand, but underneath that gesture, trillions of particles are simply following rules, forces, charges, trajectories. Physics plays first, and you arrive late, like someone stepping into a chess game already 6 moves deep, already leaning into strategies you can't quite see. Mainstream fact: Newton's laws tell us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Every motion traces back to a prior push. That principle applies as much to falling apples as it does to your neurons firing. Your sense of deciding to stand up could just be the visible surface of molecules colliding in predictable cascades. It feels romantic to imagine free floating choice. But physics has been quietly whispering no surprises since the stars first ignited. Here's the quirky tidbit. Scientists once calculated that if you could perfectly measure every atom in the universe at one instant, you could, in theory, predict everything that would ever happen afterward. Every blink, every sneeze, every late-night snack. Of course, you can't actually do that, but the idea is enough to make you giggle at the thought of a cosmic fortune teller scribbling, "You will crave potato chips at 11:42 p.m. on a slip of starlight paper." Scientists still argue whether quantum mechanics loosens this grip. Quantum particles sometimes behave unpredictably, appearing in multiple states until observed. But randomness isn't the same as choice. If anything, it's like trading clockwork for dice. Your fate either follows strict equations or rolls chaotic probabilities. Neither option places you firmly in the driver's seat. You're a passenger, buckled in, carried by forces humming beneath the skin of reality, as if the cosmos itself were humming you a lullaby. Think of your body as an orchestra, every note bound by physics. Blood pumps because pressure gradients demand it. Neurons fire because ions slip through channels in membranes. Your muscles contract when proteins slide past one another like well-oiled gears. You may decide to reach for your glass of water, but beneath that gesture is a cascade of electrochemical inevitability, molecules performing their parts without ever consulting you. You laugh softly at the irony. Even laziness is governed by physics. That heavy blanket of inertia keeping you from getting up to fetch the remote. Newton's first law in action. Bodies at rest stay at rest, especially when the couch is this comfortable, the fabric warm and pliant against your skin. Physics doesn't need your permission to enforce your lounging habits. Consider time itself. It flows one way because of entropy, the universal tendency toward disorder. That melting ice cube on your nightstand, that fading battery in your phone, that slow ache of aging, they're all echoes of the same law. You didn't agree to the rule, but you live inside it. Every decision you make is already fenced by time's arrow, moving only forward like water gliding downriver with no way back upstream. Even your sleep is physics at work. Circadian rhythms respond to light, which itself is electromagnetic radiation. Your eyes absorb photons, send signals, reset your biological clock. You might claim you chose to stay up late scrolling, but really, you just expose your retina to blue light. nudging molecules to delay melatonin release. Physics tricked you into insomnia, and you fell for it. Again, the way we all do, night after night. There's a comforting side though. Physics is predictable. You can trust the floor to support you, the air to fill your lungs, the stars to rise in their orbits. The rules may box you in, but they also cradle you. Imagine if gravity were optional. Half the time your tea would float away, and you'd spend your nights chasing biscuits mid-air. Not exactly restful, not exactly cozy. Remember those popcorn neurons from earlier? They pop because electrons zip along axons, obeying voltage gradients. Beneath every thought is a storm of physics. Beneath every memory is chemistry dancing to physical laws. And beneath tonight's drifting calm is the slow pull of gravity, holding you tenderly against the mattress, rocking you toward stillness in a rhythm older than life itself. So you sigh, surrendering to the elegance of inevitability. Every breath, every blink, every heartbeat is a physics performance. A ballet you didn't choreograph, but that still carries you gracefully towards sleep. The curtain falls softly, and the laws hum on, indifferent yet reliable, playing their lullaby in the background, while you drift deeper, further, quieter, into rest. You float further, almost laughing at the sly trick your brain loves to play, the illusion of choice. You tell yourself you're steering the ship, but your brain is more like a mischievous captain who announces decisions after they're already made. You feel the swell of, "I'll do this now." But beneath that swell, the tide had already turned, the sails already catching winds you never noticed. Mainstream fact: in the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran experiments showing brain activity spiking milliseconds before people reported consciously deciding to act. Your neurons had already warmed up the engines, and then your conscious mind strolled in, proudly taking credit. It's like arriving late to a dinner party and pretending you cooked the meal, bowing politely as the applause echoes. Here's the quirky tidbit. Later experiments revealed brain scanners could predict with eerie accuracy which button a person would press seconds before the person claimed to have decided. Imagine a machine knowing whether you'll go for the red or blue gummy bear before you even make up your mind. That's less freedom and more like your brain posting spoilers you can't avoid. A preview reel before the film has even begun. Scientists still argue whether this means choice is fake or just that consciousness is slower than we'd like to think. Maybe your brain is a diligent assistant doing the prep work, and your sense of willpower is just the boss swooping in for the photo op. Either way, the curtain is pulled back. You're less wizard and more spectator in Oz, smiling at the gears clanking behind the smoke. Think about those moments when you say, "I don't know why I did that." Your hand reached for the cookie, your foot tapped impatiently, your lips blurted the wrong name. Those weren't glitches. They were choices made before the conscious narrator got the memo. You're like the spokesperson reading lines at a press conference, unaware the real decisions were hashed out in secret boardrooms of the brain. And then there's your daily autopilot. Driving home, sometimes you forget whole stretches of the road, yet you still arrive safely. Who was in charge then? Not the chatty, conscious you. It was the backstage crew, running the machinery, while the narrator daydreamed. Consciousness shows up just in time to say, "Yes, we meant to do that," like a cat proudly dropping a dead mouse at your feet, demanding credit. You can grin at how often choice feels like a magic show. The magician waves their hand dramatically, while the real trick happens elsewhere. You believe the decision was in the flourish, but the rabbit was already stuffed in the hat. Your brain loves this theater, Consciousness isn't a driver. It's the commentator, whispering explanations over a race that's already underway, soothing you with stories that feel true enough. Remember when you swore you decided to fall in love, or to stop, or to move on. Neuroscience suggests those tidal shifts in feeling may have been well underway before you packaged them into neat sentences. By the time you said, "I've chosen this," your neurons had been warming up for days. It's like claiming you summoned a storm because you happened to open your umbrella, smiling smugly at the thunder. Even your sense of timing is slippery. Experiments show the brain can retroactively adjust when you believe you chose something. You think you decided at one moment, but the brain edits the timeline to make the narrative cleaner. Consciousness isn't just late. It's a clumsy editor, rewriting the story so you still feel in control, smoothing the seams with invisible ink. But don't despair. The illusion can be oddly comforting. If your brain is pulling strings milliseconds early, at least it's efficient. Imagine if you had to consciously micromanage every choice, from lifting a finger to adjusting your breathing. You'd never survive a day buried in endless checklists. The illusion of choice frees you from drowning in details, a kindness hidden in the trick. Remember those popcorn neurons? They don't wait for you. They fire when conditions demand it. They start the music, and you come in humming as though it was your idea all along. That's the trick. You are both audience and performer, marveling at the show while pretending to run it, smiling at the spotlight, even as it moves without your command. So as you breathe out, you let the idea settle. Maybe choice is less a sovereign act and more a sweet sleight of hand, designed to make life feel coherent. You are the magician and the fooled crowd, clapping politely as the trick repeats night after night. And in that gentle applause, you slip deeper into the soft blur of rest, lulled by the hum of inevitability. You wander now into a landscape where your future feels strangely predictable, as though someone already peeked at the script. Algorithms, ads, and subtle nudges know you almost better than you know yourself. It isn't witchcraft, it's data, quietly mapping your habits and steering your so-called choices. You scroll through a feed and think, "I'll decide what to watch." But the truth is, you are already nudged there by 1,000 hidden breadcrumbs, softly scattered in your path like invisible crumbs of light. Mainstream fact, companies like Netflix and Spotify use recommendation systems that analyze your history to predict what you'll want next. Sometimes the predictions are eerily accurate. You discover a show or a song that feels tailor-made, and you tell yourself, "I chose this." But no, the algorithm whispered, and you obeyed. It's like a waiter recommending the dessert you were already craving, then proudly taking credit for your order, smiling as though they read your mind. Here's the quirky tidbit. Supermarkets have long tracked shopping patterns to forecast future needs. One famous case involved predicting a teenage girl's pregnancy based solely on changes in her purchases. Unscented lotion, vitamins, cotton balls. She hadn't told anyone yet, but the algorithm knew. Imagine your grocery list outing your life story before you even form the words. You can't help but laugh nervously, realizing the cereal aisle might be reading you like a diary written in barcodes. Scientists still argue whether prediction strips away freedom or simply reveals patterns. Maybe you're still choosing within the patterns, or maybe the patterns are choosing you. The debate itself is comforting, like a lullaby sung in uncertainty. But the feeling lingers. If machines can forecast your next move with high probability, how free was the move in the first place? It's like dancing in a hall where the steps were choreographed long before the music reached your ears. Think about advertisements. You believe you're immune, clever, skeptical. Yet studies show that even subliminal exposure to logos can shift your behavior. A flash of a fast food logo can make people walk faster. A glimpse of a luxury brand can subtly inflate confidence. You think, I bought these sneakers because they're comfy. But maybe it was just the 10th ad you scrolled past, nudging your neurons, tapping gently on the glass until you answered. And then there's social media. Platforms study how long your eyes linger on a post, which emojis you tap, what time you scroll. They predict whether you'll laugh, cry, or rage. And they serve you content accordingly. You call it doom scrolling, but it's really predictive puppetry, strings tugging as you tap. You smile faintly because even knowing this, you'll probably still scroll tomorrow. That's the punchline. Awareness doesn't always untie the strings, and the show goes on regardless. Even your loved ones become forecasters. Your best friend might know what meal you'll order before you do. Your partner predicts your size, your cravings, your petty annoyances. These predictions aren't mystical. They're rehearsed from years of watching you. You're not a mystery novel. You're a sitcom with familiar punchlines, soft rhythms that repeat like a favorite lullaby. Remember those popcorn neurons? They fire in familiar rhythms, making you predictable even to yourself. Ever caught your hand opening the fridge without hunger? That wasn't choice. That was pattern recognition, your body saying, we usually stand here at this hour. Prediction is just pattern, magnified, looping back on itself like a song you hum without noticing. Still, there's something tender in this predictability. Patterns create safety. A child knows bedtime by routine. A cat knows when you'll feed it. You know your morning coffee is coming, and the world feels stable. Prediction may box you in, but it also cradles you like a familiar blanket, wrapping you in reassurance even as it guides your steps. Yet the irony remains. The more predictable you are, the more companies, people, and systems steer your choices. That shirt you bought, that playlist you loved, that late-night snack, all might have been predicted long before you felt the spark of deciding. The map was already drawn. You just followed the highlighted route, the glowing path you thought you discovered. So as you exhale, you settle into the thought that maybe life isn't about carving paths from nothing, but about tracing the curves already sketched by countless hands. Algorithms, traditions, habits, neurons. You're walking through a maze that sometimes feels designed just for you. And even if you didn't draw it, it still leads you gently forward, step by step, into the hush of sleep, where prediction dissolves into dream. You drift now into a dreamscape stranger than prediction, where every fork in your life may already exist. Imagine countless versions of you branching out across realities. One who turned left instead of right, one who answered the call, one who stayed home, one who never heard this story at all. It feels cinematic, like standing in a hall of mirrors, except the reflections aren't copies. They're parallel yous, each humming along on a path you didn't choose, but that still plays out somewhere, quiet as a secret melody that lingers, refusing to vanish in the dark, whispering possibilities you'll never quite catch. Mainstream fact, the many worlds. Interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that whenever particles exist in superposition, both here and there, both spin up and spin down, every outcome happens, each in its own branch of the universe. If that's true, then every decision you think you make is less a single point of power and more a spotlight on one branch among millions. You feel like the decider, but really, you're just the audience member watching one reel of the film, while the theatre next door runs the alternate cut, flickering softly through endless endings. Here's the quirky tidbit. Physicist Hugh Everett, who proposed the many worlds view in the 1950s, was mostly ignored at first. His paper sat dusty until decades later, when science fiction writers and later physicists revived it. Imagine inventing a theory that there are infinite versions of yourself, and then being largely dismissed in this version of reality. Somewhere out there is an Everett who won a Nobel Prize instantly, and somewhere else is one who became a jazz musician instead, blowing saxophone notes into a universe that cared to listen. Scientists still argue whether many worlds is real or just a mathematical convenience. But lying here, you can almost feel the shimmering possibility. Infinite you sipping infinite teas, dozing off to infinite bedtime musings, each unaware of the others. That sense of, I could have done otherwise, isn't freedom. It's just your mind brushing against the ghost branches of what already exists, as if your thoughts were fingers grazing invisible glass that stretches endlessly outward, forever unbroken. Think about the silly details. In one branch, you did brush your teeth a minute earlier, and in another, you forgot. Somewhere your parallel self is still annoyed about a mismatched sock, and somewhere else, that version never bought socks at all. Choices splinter outward like cracks in glass, each one playing out in its own rhythm. You chuckle softly at the absurdity. There might be a version of you who still believes cilantro tastes good. Poor thing, still chewing so-flavored leaves, blissfully unaware. Even pop culture toys with this. Films and books love multiverse stories. Heroes meeting alternate selves, worlds colliding. But in reality, you'll never visit those other branches. You're locked into this one reel, watching it spool forward. That sense of free will may just be your narrator brain, tidying up, unaware the other narrators are all out there, busy spinning their own justifications, their own lullabies, their own fragile stories. You glance back in memory at the job you took, the friendship you kept, the move you made. You feel proud. I chose this. But if every branch exists, then choice is just your awareness sliding down one track. Like a train switching rails without asking your permission, you continue, while infinite trains hum along elsewhere, their whistles vanishing into night, calling to no one. Remember those popcorn neurons. In this view, they're not just firing in one brain, but across countless versions of you. Every possibility pops somewhere. In one branch, your neurons sparked just differently enough that you said yes instead of no, laughed instead of frowned, stayed instead of left. Each you thinks they were the decisive author, but all of you are simply unfolding scripts, scattered across a stage too wide to ever see in full. There's comfort in this too. Regret softens when you realize there's a version of you who lived the path you mourn. Curiosity gentles when you accept you'll never meet them. You're freed from needing to live every possible life because somewhere, someone with your face already did, carrying the weight you set down with tender care, as if sharing a secret pact across branches. So you exhale, letting the mirrors fade. You aren't trapped in one choice. You're suspended in one branch of a vast, shimmering forest. You close your eyes and imagine the other yous closing theirs too. Millions of parallel heartbeats slowing in unison. Infinite lullabies folding over one another, carrying you softly into sleep, as though the whole multiverse itself were humming you to rest, gently and forevermore, a chorus without end. You float along the river of time now, noticing how its current never pauses, never rewinds. Every breath, every blink, every thought slides forward, and you can't step back upstream. Cause and effect feel like chains, soft, invisible, but unbreakable, pulling you through a sequence already set in motion. You may wiggle, but the current carries you all the same, relentless as gravity, steady as a heartbeat. You can't silence, steady as sunrise slipping over the horizon, whether you welcome it or not. Mainstream fact. Physicists call this the arrow of time, a concept rooted in entropy. Entropy always increases. Order slips toward disorder. Ice melts, coffee cools, stars burn out. You don't get to choose the direction. You live in the wake of inevitability, the tide carrying everything from galaxies to the neurons firing behind your eyelids. A vast procession that began long before you and will continue long after. An inheritance you never asked for, but can never set down. Here's the quirky tidbit. Time doesn't flow the same everywhere. Satellites orbiting Earth actually tick slightly faster than your clock because of relativity. So much so that GPS systems must adjust constantly. Without correcting for Einstein's equations, your phone's maps would send you miles off course. Time is not universal. It's stretchy, strange, and yet still one way. That's the cosmic joke. You're drifting downstream in a river whose currents warp and bend, but they never reverse, no matter how you plead or pray. Scientists still argue whether time is fundamental or an illusion stitched together by our perception. Some theories suggest that all moments exist simultaneously, like pages in a book, and your consciousness simply flips through them in sequence. If that's true, then your sense of deciding in the present is like a reader pretending to write the words already printed, mistaking the act of turning pages for authorship, confusing awareness with authorship in a story that was inked long before you opened the cover. Think of memory. You recall yesterday's lunch, not tomorrow's. The brain encodes the past, but not the future. That asymmetry makes you feel like you're steering, but really, it's just the mechanics of storage. You're facing backward in the boat, narrating what you see, while the river keeps pulling you forward, indifferent to your commentary, deaf to your insistence that you had a choice in where the water ran. Every regret you carry, every what if, is bound by this current. You can't row back and revise. The path behind you hardens, the stones sink deeper, while the water ahead remains misty, shaped by causes already trickling toward you. You say, "I'll decide tomorrow." But tomorrow's seeds are already sprouting, carried downriver, long before you feel their roots beneath your feet, or recognize their stems in the daylight. Even biology obeys this arrow. Cells age irreversibly. DNA accumulates little scars. Neurons change connections but never fully reset. You aren't a canvas waiting for new paint. You're a palimpsest, overwritten by time, with every mark shaping the next. You may feel free, but your brushstrokes are guided by the texture left behind, the grain carved by hours you can't reclaim, the grooves pressed into you by years of living and years of loss. Remember those popcorn neurons? They fire in sequences chained to milliseconds past. Each spike depends on the one before. The rhythm is forward only. The brain's electrical storms don't rewind like a song. They cascade tick by tick, like dominoes tipping into the dark, unstoppable once begun, echoing a pattern written into physics itself. Even your dreams bow to time's current. You wake, and the dream fades. You can't re-enter it exactly as it was. It dissolves, entropy tugging at the edges until only scraps remain. Dreams prove the arrow, as much as melting ice or burned out stars, slipping away no matter how tightly you chase them, no matter how hard you cling. And yet, within this inevitability, you find strange comfort. Time carries you whether you paddle or not. The pressure to control softens, because you never really could. The current doesn't ask your permission. It simply cradles you, rocking gently forward, like a lullaby woven into the fabric of reality itself, whispering that surrender is not failure, but alignment. So you exhale, letting your weight sink into the mattress. You're not fighting the river, you're floating on it. The arrow of time hums steadily, carrying galaxies, atoms, and your soft, slowing breath. Forward, always forward, into the hush of sleep, where even the silence obeys the flow, where even your dreams must follow the current deeper into the night. You sink into the final embrace of surrender, where the thought of control loosens into something softer. Maybe you never truly steered the ship. Maybe you only drifted, carried by biology, culture, physics, and time. Yet, in letting go, you discover a gentler freedom. Not the power to bend the world, but the peace of floating with it. A freedom not of domination, but of relief. The kind that comes when you set down a weight you never realized you were carrying. When your arms ache less, because you stop clenching the wheel that never turned. When your breath evens out because it no longer marches with worry. Mainstream fact: meditation practices often emphasize acceptance, encouraging people to observe thoughts without judgment. Brain scans show these states reduce stress by quieting activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain tied to self-referential chatter. You don't silence the orchestra of neurons. You simply stop insisting you're the conductor. You let the strings hum, the brass swell, the percussion rumble, and you just listen, as though you've slipped from the stage into the audience, surprised the music plays fine without your baton. Here's the quirky tidbit. In Japan, there's a word, shikata ganai, meaning it cannot be helped. It's not despair, it's shorthand for graceful surrender. Everything from typhoons to train delays falls under its umbrella. You shrug, you breathe, you accept. And somehow, that acceptance brings more calm than wrestling with things you never controlled. Similar ideas exist elsewhere. The Stoics spoke of amor fati, the love of fate, while Buddhists teach anicca, impermanence. Across cultures, the wisdom repeats: clinging deepens pain, but yielding allows peace to seep through, the way rain seeps into soil, nourishing without fanfare. Scientists still argue whether letting go is the same as giving up, or whether acceptance opens a doorway to well-being. But tonight, lying here, the debate feels irrelevant. You can feel the muscles in your shoulders softening, your jaw unclenching, as though your body already knew. The truest freedom is freedom from needing to be in charge. No philosophy class required. Your bones whisper the lesson, carrying an ancient memory of rivers, winds, and seasons that never ask permission to flow. Think of the way water moves. A river doesn't resist rocks, it curves around them, flowing easily. The current never argues, "I should have gone straight." It simply follows the terrain. Your life may be no different. Twists, bends, little waterfalls, all part of a larger motion. You don't need to script the journey. You are the journey. And like water, you shape and are shaped by the banks you pass. Even floods and droughts belong to the same cycle, a rhythm larger than preference or planning, as if the universe itself breathes through you, in waves you cannot measure but still feel. You chuckle faintly at the irony. After hours unraveling illusions of control, you end up here, finding comfort in the lack of it. Remember those popcorn neurons, the genes, the culture, the physics, the mirrors of parallel U's, the river of time. They were never your leash, they were your cradle. All along, you were being rocked, gently and endlessly. You were never the captain barking orders from the deck. You were the passenger in the cabin, lulled by the sound of waves slapping the hull, safe because you are never steering, only carried in a vessel larger than yourself. You let yourself imagine this surrender as a hammock strung between stars swaying softly. You don't grip the ropes, you don't demand a destination. You simply sway, and in that sway you find the sweetest ease. Maybe the stars don't care that you're there. Maybe the cosmos has no opinion of your breathing, but in your small corner of it, the hammock holds, the ropes stretch, the fabric sighs with your weight. That's enough. It is enough to be suspended, neither falling nor climbing, but gently rocked in a lullaby older than language. Another image flickers through. Surrender as lying in tall grass, the earth holding you like an ancient parent. You can't fall because there is nowhere lower to go. You can't lose because the ground has already claimed you. Even gravity, that most relentless of rules, feels less like a chain and more like an embrace when you stop resisting, when you realize it has been hugging you to the planet all along. So you sigh, releasing even the need to decide when sleep will come. It comes when it does, like a tide rising around your ankles, like a fan's hum blurring into silence, like a story that keeps telling itself after the reader drifts off. You don't command it, you allow it. And in that allowing, you're finally free, as if the river of time has carried you not just downstream but into stillness, where there is no steering, no struggle, only the quiet mercy of rest, the kind that feels less like an ending and more like a return. And here, at the edge of night, the story softens into whispers. You've walked through neurons and stardust, through memories and currents of time, and now you can let it all dissolve. Each thought fades like mist. Each muscle unwinds like thread slipping free of a knot. The fan hums, the darkness cradles you, and nothing more is required. Just rest, just breathe, just the quiet rhythm carrying you toward morning. You don't need to hold on. You're already held. Sweet dreams.